expansion. It's a pretty cool map. It's pretty sizable. It's got a lot of interesting natural terrain. Not as much urban terrain as something like, well, obviously not as much as like Fallujah or Zargabad, which are both pretty urban focused. This one's got a lot more, you know, kind of hills and valleys and small villages, but it's a pretty cool map, and I like it a lot for doing stuff like patrols, and it's really fun to kind of just mess around in this map. So we're going to take a quick look on it. First, I'm just going to fly to the northeast, give you guys an idea of just how big this map is from one corner to another. And you'll also notice that looking around is a little smoother this time around. I got some head tracking working, which is actually why this video is going up pretty late. And so I should be able to look around a lot better, and it's kind of new, so there's some issues with the system, but so far it's been pretty cool, and now I can actually look around properly while I'm flying around instead of having, you know, real jerky movements and all that stuff. So hopefully this is a little better for you guys to watch. So one of the cool things about this map is that there is a lot of just kind of like a lot of settlements that kind of stretch out for a while, and they're all pretty close to the road, like you can see here. They don't really stretch out too much beyond the road, but they do kind of go on for a while, which is interesting for patrols and stuff, because if you're patrolling through, you know, a place like that over on the left, obviously you're going to spend a lot of time in those buildings, but there's not a lot of buildings to either side, and it's a lot more, you're not really sure if the enemy is necessarily going to pop out, you know, 20 meters away in a nearby house, or if they're going to be up on one of these hills on the other side, because you're kind of in a valley. So that can be really fun. It's also really good for, this map is really good for like mounted patrols, because there's lots of good roads and stuff, and all the roads pass through some interesting places and stuff. It's not quite it's not quite as foreboding with all of its valleys as Clafgan, which will be in the next video, which I should be getting up pretty much immediately after this. But there's still lots of valleys, which is always interesting, because there's always the threat of, you know, ambushes. You know, if you're in a valley, you're pretty much in the worst possible position you could be in, because it's so easy to, not only to ambush you, because, you know, there can be someone hiding behind the crest of the ridge of the valley to either side, but also means that they can attack you from both sides simultaneously without having to worry about crossfire, and the only person that has to deal with, or the only people who have to deal with the crossfire is your own guys, so it can be pretty deadly, and so you have to keep an eye out on all sides, basically, which is one of the things that I like about this map, or something like Chernaris, which tends to be a little more rolling hills and stuff like that. So this map is it's a little more rugged, and that's definitely makes for some interesting stuff, and I just love looking around this place. It just looks really cool, I think. You know, all these valleys and ridges and roads and stuff like that, and as I said in my past videos, I prefer some of the Middle Eastern stuff to the Russian stuff of ArmA 2 Core, so I really like this map a lot. Not quite as much as I do some of the community-made stuff like Fallujah, which is really interesting, and Clafgan, which is kind of my personal favorite so far. You can see some oil fields over there, which are interesting and always fun to check out and stuff. Some foothills over here, and this map is definitely big enough that it can have kind of little random things all over the place, while at the same time having some big population centers and all that kind of stuff. So it's a fun map for sure. And here we are coming up on the northeastern corner. We started down in the southwest, and after we kind of fly over this little town, I'm gonna kind of bring the helicopter down and then go west towards the airfield, so you guys can get a look at that. I actually think this is one of the larger population centers in this area, up here on the west. Be able to get a better look right there. And one of the cool things about this map also is that there's a lot of variety with the various kind of villages and towns, what have you. You can see this one has a lot of trees and stuff, but there's others that don't have really any vegetation at all. This one has a lot of kind of empty space between some of the compounds here. Like you can see the compound just immediately to our left, and there's mostly just trees between that and the next little group of compounds and houses, which makes for some interesting stuff here. Another thing that's nice about the Arrowhead stuff is all of the buildings are enterable, which it makes the map feel a lot more interesting, and it gives a lot more possibility, because you know a lot of these buildings you can totally enter and stuff, and they're really simple, so you're not going to get a whole lot of action inside of a single home, but it's definitely tense going from building to building, and if you have to clear out all those buildings and stuff, or if you know that there's something that you need to find in a particular village, there's a lot of houses you have to search and stuff, and you're not sure where you're going to find it. You're not sure if you're going to find enemies or even booby traps inside those houses, so that can be fun. Alright, now we should be heading west to the airfield now. And here's another big population center coming up just to the left. Again, even with this larger population center, a lot of it's kind of stretched out in one particular way. This one's a little less so, but it's kind of at the fork of the road there, so it still keeps pretty close to the road. And here's that oil field we saw earlier. I haven't really done anything in this area, honestly, but as you can see, there's a lot of interesting cover, and this could definitely be an interesting place to do something. You can hear those pumps or whatever they are going, which is always cool. And as you can see over to the southwest, or maybe it's more west, is that airfield coming up, and I believe this is the largest population center on the map right here, next to the airfield. This is a pretty sizable little town here. It's got a little compound down there. Lots of interesting stuff going on here. And as you can see, this area is also a little more vegetated, and there's some agricultural fields like that. A little more variety than some of the other towns and stuff here. So, and here you have an airfield, and there's a bunch of I'm not really sure what it is about these Middle Eastern maps, but most of the airfields have a lot of wrecks nearby. Just a lot of just broken down cars, just totally rusted out and stuff. So, all right, now we're gonna look at Zargabad, which is it's basically just a city. There's not really much more to it. There is some open ground around it, and some other interesting features. There's a river that goes along the southern side, I think, or maybe it's the eastern side of the map. And there's also a dry riverbed on the other side of the city from that. I will say that I do have some issues with frame rate here, running all these settings all the way up. This map is probably the most intensive area once you get into the city that core ArmA 2 has to offer, or maybe not core, but at least that Bohemia has provided us with. So I will warn you ahead of time, the frame rate does get kind of dicey here, but there's, I guess, kind of good reason for it. One thing I will say is I'm really hopeful that ArmA 3 fixes the issue of ArmA 2, where it just cannot handle rendering a lot of objects at once when you have all that stuff set up to high. It does look really cool being able to see this whole city, and when you see Fallujah, it's honestly really impressive, despite the fact that the frame rate goes down to about 5 frames per second. But hopefully in ArmA 3 we'll be able to have big cityscapes like this and be able to look across them without having absolutely dreadful frame rates. It's not too bad here, but this is a really interesting place if you want to do urban combat. And there's just enough stuff kind of on the outskirts, like all these fields and stuff, and there's the villa over to the east of us we just passed, where you can kind of make an approach or make an insertion or what have you. But being a big city, there's definitely a lot of potential for more close quarters combat, and because most of the buildings are at least partially enterable, that leads to a lot of interesting potential for ambushes and where you'll meet contacts and stuff. As you can see, it's actually a pretty small map, but it makes up for its size with density inside the actual city itself. That's pretty much the length of it. So yeah, it's pretty quick to get over, but again, there's a lot going on in this map, so it's not like Utah's where it takes you 5 seconds to get across it, but there's also nothing really in those 5 seconds. Whereas in this, you know, there's, I don't know how many buildings there are in the city, but it's a whole lot. You know, like it's a proper city, I would say, and that leads to a lot of interesting potentials. And there's also all this stuff kind of on the outskirts, which again, like I said, you don't just have to be purely engaged in urban operations. There's a little bit here, so you can have some other interesting things going on. You know, that villa is pretty fun to, you know, assault or even defend. And there's also some kind of compound over there, some kind of military installation. There's that dry riverbed that I was telling you about, and somewhere along here there's some actual water, but not a whole lot, but enough to make things interesting. And here's the airfield up ahead of us. It's really close to the city, so you know. And again, I think there's also a pretty big collection of wreckage somewhere near this airfield as well, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, but I think there is somewhere, which is always interesting for, you know, you could potentially set it up so that, you know, the airfield is friendly, and maybe there's some training area, you know, where they're using a junkyard or whatever the hell it is for weapons training and stuff like that. Videos. Oh, yeah, there they are, right over there. It's kind of a neat little touch. I'm not really sure why those junkyards are always right next to the airport, but well, there you have it. And here's kind of a better look at the city, kind of get an idea of what everything's like. And again, like all these windows and balconies you're seeing could potentially hold enemies. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. You have this mosque up ahead in the center of town, which I mean, I don't think there's too much of the mosque that you can really go into beyond going through the walls and stuff. But it's still an interesting place. Like, that could be an enemy stronghold or something like that. You've got these nice spires around the city, a couple of them, which again are interesting for, you know, potentially like an enemy sniper or for, you know, friendly snipers to take a position up in. You've got a few roads leading out and into the city, and some compounds along those, which can be, again, a good place to kind of like move through and break up the scenery a little bit. Either, you know, if you're inserting by the ground, or if you're egressing out of the city. And I cannot express how awesome and useful having head tracking is. Like for these videos in particular, where I'm just kind of trying to look around and see what's going on and show you guys what these maps have to offer. It's invaluable. Here's that like villa I was talking about. This is a really fun place to, you know, assault this position or something like that. You know, you can have a bunch of enemies holed up in here, and I've had some pretty rough but enjoyable operations in this area where we had to assault this area. And like there's one time we had to, I think we were trying to find some intel that was in that villa somewhere, and we weren't really sure if it was occupied by friendly or opposition forces, and that turned into a bloodbath pretty quickly. And it was a real rough fight because we were inside the villa itself, and we had no idea if the guys upstairs were bad or not. We could hear like groans and moans from what sounded like some kind of wounded individual, so we had no idea what was going on. And well, as it turns out, there were some unfriendly guys upstairs and stuff, and that ended up turning into a pretty prolonged battle. So there's a lot of interesting stuff on this map for sure. For such a small map, it's fairly dense. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of the scale of some of the Operation Arrowhead stuff as compared to original ArmA 2, and eventually, tomorrow, pretty soon actually, ArmA 3. So I'll put up the next video really quickly here, guys, so look forward to that. Thanks a lot.